Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast where we answer a simple question on each show. Who's better at baseball? And speaking of who's better at baseball, what's better than baseball? Patrick, you were covering a series this weekend. How is that checking out the Rockies in Denver there?
Well, it was the home opener, which is always exciting, very much holiday type vibes in the ballpark. Rockies ended up blowing a 4-run lead. Hard to keep track because they also then blew a 5-run lead on Saturday. But on the home opener, they did get a walk-off grand slam from Ryan McMahon, only the third in Rockies franchise history. They weren't as lucky on Saturday, Sunday. Ryan Pepio just shut down Colorado's lineup in a really big way. But one win, 2 losses for Colorado, but the players' individual performances were certainly a lot better than the win-loss record has been for the team right now.
And that's what you got to do sometimes when you're looking at a rebuilding team, focus on player performance in particular. We're going to get into a lot of that today when we're talking about some breakout stars in both the American League and the National League. Before we do that, what I want to do is I want to do a little check-in on some of the topics we just discussed on Wednesday's show because some guys stood out from the last conversation we had. We'll start with Tyler O'Neill. We discussed who was better, Tyler O'Neill or Michael Conforto. Well, and we also came to the conclusion that it was Michael Conforto. Tyler O'Neill said, hold on, guys. Hold on. I'm going to hit 3 home runs this weekend. I'm going to lead Major League Baseball in OPS. Maybe I'm better, and maybe I'm back to being a guy that might get MVP votes this year. So Tyler O'Neill really kind of put us on notice this weekend.
Oh, he did. He made us look bad. Every box score that I looked at, I saw Tyler O'Neill and said, wait, I picked O'Neill, right? I picked O'Neill over Conforto, and I each time I couldn't convince myself. I know what I said, and I think Tyler O'Neill knows what we said. So, Tyler, we apologize. Let's see if you can keep it up.
And I will say, Conforto's still in the top 5 in Major League Baseball and OPS. So, both guys playing well right now. We also discussed Yoshinobu Yamamoto versus Shota Imanaga. And, they pitched to a draw this weekend. Neither gave up a run in the same series, mind you. Yamamoto got his first big league win, 5 scoreless, 8 strikeouts. Imanaga might have been trending towards a similar start, only got to 4 innings because of a rain delay. But, again, these two guys are starting to develop a little bit of I don't know if it's a budding rivalry yet, but just something to monitor all year here in that NL Rookie of the Year race.
Yeah, plenty of storylines going on where the NL West seems like that's the division where the most young, or rather rookie talent is located. So it's fun to have those guys kind of go against one another, and I'm sure they'll find each other again. That's usually how the baseball season works out.
Yep, for sure. For sure. We also talked about Pirates Brewers last week. Pirates won their series against the Orioles to move to 8-2. Are we buying into the Pirates a little more after beating that team?
Even more so. I think you absolutely have to, doing it against the best team in the American League, really. So for them to continue to do those things, it's very important. We'll really wait to see if they can extend this positive play into May and June, because we know they weren't able to do that this time last year. So that will be a little bit more critical. And I think they're going to fare better. They learned a lot from that experience in 2023.
I think so as well. And the Brewers did. They held their own. They beat the Mariners this weekend. We also touched on converted relievers to starters. A couple of them made another turn through the rotation. Garrett Crochet, his 3rd start today. 5 innings, allowed 2 against the Royals. Now through 3 starts, he's got 18 innings pitched, a 2.0 ERA, 21 strikeouts. Jordan Hicks went 7 strong against the against the Padres on Friday. Allowed 1 run, 5 strikeouts. These guys, looks like they're going to stay in the rotation, it feels like.
Oh, absolutely. If you're dealing like that, it doesn't matter. You can't have enough pitching depth, no doubt. But if you are amongst one of the best at your craft starting games, there's no reason to go back into a bullpen. And from what we're going to talk about in just a little bit, you really can't have enough starting pitching depth. So if you're healthy and you're dealing like Jordan Hicks and Garrett Crochet, you're going to go out there and get the ball every 5 days.
Let's build off of that perfect transition because we can't ignore the biggest story of the weekend. We're going to title this segment "What's Worse," which really it's just a matter of talking about what's worse in baseball right now. Spencer Strider and Shane Bieber. We're going to start with Strider, although we don't know yet if he is ultimately going to need Tommy John surgery, but it's a UCL injury. Right now, he's on the 15-day IL with a sprained UCL. He's getting more opinions from more doctors. Hopefully, it's not that, but we all kind of feel like it might be trending that way. I mean, just in general, just every week, pitchers are dropping like flies. How can baseball combat this, or will they even attempt to? Or is it just going to be kind of a recycle? We're just going to keep cycling through arms. You're going to go down. You're going to be out for a couple of years. The next young guy is going to throw 100, comes up. It's just crazy.
I think baseball is trying to get away from that, but we are going to see that, I think, for a few more years until the ship can right itself. You know, one of the things that baseball and baseball-minded people inside the game, at the top of the game, want to do is get back to solid starting pitching, going consistently 6 and 7 innings. And obviously you can't do that if you're on the IL. And it's harder to do that when you have an entire bullpen full of guys throwing in the upper 90s, which is something that teams want. So it is a bit of a contradiction for teams to both want velocity, but they also want health. You kind of can't have it both ways. You need to have a little bit of a little bit of patience. And to your point, it's almost like, well, I've got 3 guys. In the past, it would be if you had 3 players to choose between, you had to pick one of them and kind of stick with them for just a little bit to see how it would work out before you can move on to option B or option C. Whereas now you go with option A and you just have them throw until the wheels fall off. And then when he gets hurt, you're done for a year. Let's go to option B. You pitch until you break down, and then you go to option C. And I think baseball wants to really get away from that. And they've got a lot of answers to a lot of questions that they need to answer, especially if you ask Tony Clark, head of the MLB Players Association.
Yeah, it's an epidemic, really. It's crazy. It just does not stop. And you got to go into a season if you're trying to compete and have, 8, 9, 10 guys on the depth chart, because you just don't know when guys are going to drop off. Speaking specifically to the Braves now losing Strider, I do think they have enough depth to be fine in the regular season. I'm not going to say, oh, now let's just say Strider does end up going down. The Braves are going to all of a sudden, not win the NL East. I think they're still, even without Strider, the clear favorites. You look at that rotation. Right now they called up Alan Winans to take Strider's spot, but Bryce Elder just started on Saturday. I would think at some point Elder gets a spot back in that rotation. He was an all-star last year, so their rotation still looks solid. It's Max Fried, Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez. Talk about converted reliever. Now he's even further from getting bounced from that rotation. And Bryce Elder, eventually, right now, Alan Winans. They still have AJ Smith-Shawver, a top prospect that came up last year. He could end up taking some starts this year. Dylan Dodd in AAA. We saw him last season. And then Ian Anderson recovering from Tommy John, who could be back midseason. So what do you think just about the Braves being able to get through the regular season here?
Yeah, they definitely have the depth of starting pitchers on the 40-man roster. Darius Vines, Oscar Inoa. Also, those are 2 more options that you hope you don't have to get there. You don't have to go to that route. But I think they've got the depth to get it done. The thing that becomes problematic for Atlanta more so than Cleveland in this Shane Bieber versus Spencer Strider, whose injury is the worst, is the fact that Atlanta's minor league system has been a little bit depleted over the last couple off seasons, going out and acquiring both Sean Murphy and Matt Olson from the A's in separate deals. So their farm system has obviously taken a hit. Even getting Chris Sale, you lose a guy like Vaughn Grissom. So they're not going to be able to make those moves at the trade deadline and offload some of that young talent because, frankly, their young talent isn't going to be the same match as so many other teams out there, coupled with the fact that there aren't too many options right now for players that can go. Maybe you got like a Jesus Luzardo, but with how much time he has left until free agency, that's going to be a premium price for teams to have to pay in order to get Marlins best pitcher. And they also have lost a guy too in Yuri Perez. So the injury bug has bitten everyone in a different way, it seems like.
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, Shane Bieber would have been a guy like, oh, maybe you can get Bieber. Now you can't. I think that the pressure really is on, for one, Max Fried. I mean, this is his contract year going into free agency. They need Fried to now be an ace even more so because Spencer Strider, I think, was the most given answer they had atop that rotation. You just knew that he was a guy that you could count on all season. And when it came to playoff time, he was going to be able to step up and take the ball game 1. Now it's on Fried, Charlie Morton, and Chris Sale too. I mean, these guys are like longer into their careers. We don't know how much of their prime is left. So those three now are really, really imperative. And who knows, maybe it is a Smith Shawver or a Bryce Elder that eventually steps up with a bigger role. But I think come playoff time, that's where this injury is really going to be felt. And that's assuming he can't go, because maybe we get best case scenario and it's just a rest. Maybe he gets an injection or something and Strider can come back for that postseason run. But I think that's where they will really feel this.
Yeah, that Reynaldo Lopez signing in the offseason really looks like that much more of a genius move, a swing man that if he does well, he's in the rotation. Well, he's definitely going to be staying in the rotation for the foreseeable future for Atlanta right now.
Absolutely. And one last note on Strider. I just found his contract really interesting now because we all remember he signed that extension. I believe it was 6 years, $75 million. This year he's making $1 million. Next year, when he potentially could be rehabbing, he's making $4 million. If he does go down, when he comes back, that's where the contract actually ticked up. So good on Strider for getting that guaranteed money, because he'll have $20 million coming his way in 2026, 22, in both 27 and 28, and a $22 million club option in 2029. So contractually, he's locked in. No worries there on his end. The Braves have him locked up for whatever happens here. Shane Bieber, when it comes to the contract, this is where it really hurts the Guardians. Now, we'll talk to about how they can get by without him, because I still think this is a team that has been so good at developing pitching that the Guardians could still win the Central. I don't think that this takes them out of it, but you lose an asset here. And I remember when Dylan Cease got traded, some people were saying, did they sell too soon? Could he have improved his stock at the deadline? This is exactly why you take the package in front of you when you can. Imagine the Orioles called up the Guardians at some point this offseason for Shane Bieber. And you might not have got the same package for Corbin Burns, but maybe you could have got Joey Ortiz to be your shortstop this year. And you held on to Bieber expecting a bounce back. Granted, it seemed like he was on his way to that, but now you lose the asset. And, for Bieber, now he's heading into free agency off of Tommy John.
It's similar to that Brandon Woodruff situation with Milwaukee, where they're both sides are really kind of screwed in many ways, and you hate to see that for an ace like Shane Bieber going down, especially at the same time as so many of these other guys. It's wild that it all happens like that. But yeah, Cleveland really left out in the cold, because when you've got your ace gone, everybody else slides up, and there's a reason that there's a term called the number 2 starter, because you just don't have that it factor to be a number 1 just yet. And that's not a knock on those number 2 guys, but they're great in that role. All of a sudden, everybody's role changes, and that can really just put a club at a major disadvantage. And in a very winnable division like the AL Central, which we will also get to, that's going to really ding Cleveland in a big way this entire season.
It will. And I think the good thing for them is they will have Gavin Williams coming back here. He had an elbow injury in spring, another one, but no Tommy John. He's working his way back. He's ramping up. So that's the eventual replacement here is he's going to be able to slide into that rotation. They haven't made a decision about who's going to grab a spot yet. I believe they had an off day where they're able to sort of kick the can down the road a little bit on this. But when Gavin Williams was going to come up, Carlos Carrasco was looking like the odd man out. Now Carrasco signed on a minor league deal, brought him back to where he spent a large portion of his career. He might be a fixture in this rotation. And I watched Carrasco pitch the last couple of years, and it's very hit or miss. So I have a question for you, Patrick. I set the over-under at 121 innings pitched. Now, how I got to that was 2022, he threw 152 innings for the Mets. Good year. I think his ERA was in the 3.6s. Last year, he threw 90 innings for the Mets. So I combined the two. I divided it. I came up with that line, 121 innings. Would you take the over or the under on that for Carlos Carrasco this year?
I'm going to take the over on that. I am, because going back to what I was saying before about the roles and the job that's at hand, Stephen Vogt and his staff of coaches are going to talk to Carlos Carrasco, a veteran, and talk to all those young guys. But I think it's easier to get through to someone like Carrasco, who's in a no-lose situation. He can go out there and trust the coaching staff and say, when they say, eat up innings, like it's fine. We're going to leave you out there maybe a little bit. Don't worry about the ERA, because you've got a spot here. and he's had his career already. Where those young guys, they can hear that, but they know they're still trying to establish themselves in a big way. So it's hard to maybe, sit back and have a different approach to look at, more quantity of innings rather than quality of innings. Whereas Carrasco, his job, I think, is going to be more getting that quantity. And so I think it's for that reason he's going to be over that mark.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, because sometimes you need that pitcher to just sort of go out there, and if they're left out to dry, just eat them up. And Carrasco can do that. I think it helps that he's pitching in a division that has a lot of big ballparks. A guy that can hopefully pitch to contact, not walk too many, and try to hang in there. But yeah, when you lose Bieber, who is going to be a big source of innings, maybe even more of a reason to sort of ignore what that ERA says. This is a veteran. He's going to show up every fifth day. Be prepared. And some days it'll be great. There will be days where Carrasco will get the ball hit hard in the right places, and he can last. But yeah, he's a really important piece. Now the other guys have to step up. You got Tyler Beatty, who was a longman who could get stretched out. Ben Lively, Xavier Curry, Joey Quintillo is their top prospect. So they got some options, but it's one of those situations here with the Guardians where you're just hoping that pitching farm can just give you another arm that's going to jump out like they did with a couple guys last year.
It's true. And I think Vogt has to really protect a lot of those young guys as well. I think that's another component to it, where I don't think you want 5 really young starters like Cleveland could possibly have if you subtract Carrasco from that rotation. And then when you do something like that, you could overexpose those young players, which thereby overexposes your bullpen, which has a lot of good young arms in it as well. So it's definitely a balancing act in many ways. And overall, I think it just becomes a little bit more stable with a veteran guy like a Carlos Carrasco in that rotation, even if he's giving you something closer to a 5 ERA. You're going to take that if he's eating up the innings.
Absolutely. And I think also what we need to see is you're going to need to see in Cleveland, Tristan McKenzie, can he be a frontline guy? Tanner Bybee coming off a good rookie season. Logan Allen, can these guys take that next step? Because we thought at some point they would have to do it. But again, we were sort of circling the end of July maybe when they'd have to fill in that role atop the rotation. Now they're front and center in this division.
Yeah, Cleveland, that's rough between the Bieber injury in Cleveland, Royce Lewis in Minnesota, the Tigers, Royals, their White Sox, maybe even to a degree. They're looking around going, oh man, I hope we're not next.
For sure. You know what? Since you mentioned the Tigers and Royals, let's save some breakout stars for later on in the show. Let's get right into who's better between the Detroit Tigers and the Kansas City Royals, 2 teams in this division that have gotten off to a great start. For the Tigers, it was 5-0. They went out first series. They got the White Sox on the schedule. They took care of business. They squared off against the Mets. They won the first game. They waited about 48 hours with a bunch of rain. Got to play a doubleheader. Took the first one, nearly got another sweep. But in the 9th inning, the Mets walked them off. Pete Alonso hit a ridiculous home run in that game. Otherwise, I think the Tigers would have another one on their ledger there. And then this weekend, surprisingly, the A's got to the Tigers. So are you concerned at all about the A's coming into town and taking a series? How do you feel about the Tigers still through this first week and a half of the season?
Yeah, I think this was a really good start for them as far as who their opponent is, right? I think in the NFL, obviously, strength of schedule is something that you're really looking at last year's records to kind of figure out what's happening this year. We know baseball has much more variability, but I think there is something true to those teams that had success last year, facing them early on in the season in 2024, and how that can, really be a challenge. And, Detroit got a bit of a cushion there for sure. And so I think that they've made the most of it. It is, probably disappointing for a lot of Tigers fans. You're not able to do more against the A's. But even still, I think this is a good, solid start for so many of those young guys on that roster to really ease into this start of the season and say, okay, we might have something here. Let's just kind of do our thing. And maybe, just maybe, the guy at the end of the clubhouse, Javi Baez, starts to contribute something at some point.
I'll tell you, he looks lost. I mean, nothing new, but I hope that maybe in a winning situation, Javi can show up a little bit, because we see him in the World Baseball Classic. Like, it's still in there, where you get him into some big games and he can sort of rise to the occasion. Maybe if, in June, July, Comerica starts to get a big crowd going, maybe Javi can step up his game. Looking at the other team in this conversation, the Royals, 6-4 start for them. They lost to the Twins in the opening series and then to the Orioles in the second series, but played some close games against Baltimore. They hung in there. They got a game in each of those. And then they got the White Sox, 4-game series, and they handled business. A 4-game sweep. So they went from 2-4 to 6-4. We can't overreact to that series. But what I will tell you about the Royals, have you seen what their rotation has done two turns through at this point?
It's been the best in baseball, really. It
Yeah.
has been. Matt Quatraro, one of those Tampa Bay Rays guys. Every franchise, every organization needs to go and poach some of those players. It's a big topic of conversation in Colorado. If they want to be serious, go to the teams that have been serious and that have been successful. Take from that organization. It will work. Mike Elias from Houston going to Baltimore. Matt Quatraro, a Rays guy. So yeah, that rotation has been great. And we've kind of been talking about it so far since the inception of this iteration of the show about how good the Royals off season was. And these veteran pitchers, particularly the Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, two guys that, hey, you're kind of ticketed for the bullpen, but the Royals are going to give me an opportunity, and I'm going to bet on myself. Lugo even opting out of his deal with San Diego, having that belief in himself. So that's nice to see those Royals guys coming through. Cole Reagan's kind of an afterthought for Texas, a cast off, if you will. Brady Singer finally putting it together after being a first round, hype guy. It's nice to see all of those guys having that success.
Yeah, this 5-man rotation has me believing in the Royals right now because, like you mentioned, I mean, one of the best ERAs in baseball, 2.53 team ERA. But you look at two turns of the rotation for each of these guys. Singer, he's allowed 1 earned run in 13 1/3, 14 strikeouts, 2 walks. That's a 0.68 ERA. Seth Lugo, 12 2/3, 1 earned run, 7 strikeouts, 3 walks, 0.71 ERA. Cole Reagan's 12 1/3, 16 strikeouts, 5 walks, 2 earned, 1.46 ERA. Michael Wacha, 12 innings, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks, 3 earned, 2.25 ERA. And then Alec Marsh, 11 2/3, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks, 3 earned runs, 3.09 ERA. The thing that jumps out more than the low ERAs, all those guys but Marsh, at least 12 innings pitched through 2 starts. There's some length right there that you're getting out of your starting pitchers to help a bullpen. I would think the Tigers have a better bullpen than the Royals right now, but if the Royals keep getting length from their starters, that bullpen's going to look even better because a rested bullpen is a very good bullpen.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's the bullpen that's going to be the suspect part for this roster right now, kind of going by closer by committee. I think they've had 3 different guys save games here within the first week plus of the season. So they'll have to figure that out at some point. I think that will be an easy question to answer once you get closer to that trade deadline, maybe even be a little aggressive and make a move in late June, which we've seen some teams be able to do. So they should be able to kind of fix that situation. But to your point, I mean, if the rotation is this solid, I think that's going to give confidence to the bullpen, make their job a little bit easier, and allow them to play through an area of weakness, which is the bullpen.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you look at how these two teams in particular are going to have to win games. Like you mentioned, that's an easy thing to address. I think for the Tigers, the area that I'm looking at where I say, I don't know if they stack with the Royals is that rotation. That's going to be a little bit harder to address. They're going to need their 2 free agent acquisitions to step up, and that's Jack Flaherty and Kenta Maeda. So far, not so good for either. Flaherty gave up 7 runs his first 2 starts. Maeda, 9 runs given up first 2 starts. Skubal looks great as their ace. But beyond that, a lot of question marks. Those guys got to step up. And then you have gotten some good performances from Reese Olson and Matt Manning, but they were against the Mets. So I'm telling you, can't hit anybody right now. So I will say Olson, his stuff looks great. And he had a good season last year. Manning, he came up for a spot start. I don't know how much is going to be part of the rotation. Casey Mize, the stuff looked good as well, coming off Tommy John. So there are options, but I think with the Royals, there's a little more certainty in that rotation. The Tigers got to answer those questions, and they also might have to make a big swing at the deadline if they're in this mix.
Yeah, they do have a little bit of that depth, like you said, with guys that have some high upside, but there's volatility there with Mize just coming back from TJ. So the rotation and that can get costly too, as we know, at the trade deadline, even for like a number 3, number 4 starter. Those guys can definitely eat up innings, but it's nice to look at the AL Central and not see like a total mess. Like there's definitely some promise going on there. And Detroit being bad for so long, we're starting to see some of those young guys finally come up and impact the roster, and the Royals are very exciting. That's
They
fun.
are. They are. And to close out the book on these two teams before we answer the question ultimately who's better, looking at the lineups, right? The Royals hit a lot of home runs this year. It's early, but they're the second most home runs in baseball right now. Just behind the Dodgers. They're ahead of the Braves. They have 14. Dodgers have 15. Braves, Red Sox, Astros all have 13. But you look at the lineups, right? So I look at the top six for the Tigers. Parker Meadows will be interesting to see how he established himself this year. Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, Kerry Carpenter, Colt Keith, and then Mark Canha and Gio Urshela coming up behind them. And then there's the Javi Baez question with Jake Rogers rounding it out. But there's a lot of really interesting pieces. And I kind of like the floor of what this Tigers team has. The Royals, there's also a lot of high upside guys, but guys that have also struggled for large stretches of their early big league careers outside, of course, of Bobby Witt. So what's kind of your take on these two lineups at this stage?
The bullpen question mark is really the one that just bothers me so much with Kansas City, but they are definitely, I think, the more exciting team. I mean, you're right. With all those Tigers hitters, some of them are going to be able to pull through and kind of match those projections and the hype that's been on them, being early round draft picks, and the rotation. Kenta Maeda, he's a pro. He's going to figure it out at some point. Same with Jack Flaherty and the bullpen. The names are there, but we have seen rosters like this before where, hey, it looks like all of the pieces are there in general. I mean, you can probably in some shape or form compare the Mets roster last year to this Tigers team. Obviously, the superstars and the money that's doled out for the rosters are completely different in that capacity. But you go, hey, the pieces are here for it to get done. I just don't know if it will. I'd rather take my chances, I think, with the Royals and their high upside. I think it would be a much more fun watch to see them actually come to fruition and really be the better of these two teams.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. The rotation to me is the real selling point where I think the Royals are better, but these are teams that can absolutely hang in there, and they might just be defined by the deadline, depending on how aggressive they are, how much they're in the mix, and the pieces they add that could swing it. I think these are teams that are probably close to 500 for most of the year, maybe a little bit better than that. And those are typically wild card teams, or now those are teams in the AL Central that hang in the mix. And then you never know what happens once you get a little bit later on this season. Let's actually build off of the Royals here as we get into who are the early breakout stars in the American League, because MJ Melendez, guy that was a top prospect, he's hitting 323 to start the year, and he has 3 home runs. Vinny Pasquantino could be a breakout star, but he's struggling up to this point. What do you think about sort of the breakout potential of some of these Royals?
Yeah, they've got so many of those young players surrounding Bobby Witt Jr., who's still a breakout potential kind of guy, right? Like we saw how good he was. And yet when players eventually ascend to being the best of their generation, or at least for those who do become the best of their generation, sometimes they take those leaps and bounds. And I think we're still seeing Bobby Witt Jr. take, even more steps towards being that best player of his generation. So, he's surrounded by a bunch of those guys. Michael Garcia is another one there that I think you have to look at and say, okay, there's something going on, shifting over to third base. Vinny Pasquantino, rough start, but in general, they're leaving him in there, right there in the heart of that lineup. He's still hitting third despite some of the struggles that he's been going through. And you still have a veteran guy like Salvador Perez doing the thing that Javi Baez, isn't doing right now, which is, coming through in the clutch and being an absolute monster once again for the Royals.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then the Tigers, they don't really have anyone that has put up great numbers to start. Colt Keith, from watching those games, he had some good at bats. Riley Green had a home run there. Torkelson had a great second half last year. He's trying to build off that. So they have some pieces that could break out. Kerry Carpenter is the one that nobody talks about. He's probably the best player of the bunch. So the Tigers definitely got some guys going around the American League to really spotlight the guys who have got off to great starts. Anthony Volpe for the Yankees, hitting over 400. And right there with him up the middle, Oswaldo Cabrera, couple home runs. He's hitting 333. They've also both talked to think about the impact of having Juan Soto as part of their team, watching the way he wears down pitchers and then learning from his approach. great to see those guys really jump out, because if they can not sustain this, but sustain, a much better season than what we've seen in the past, that's going to make this Yankees lineup a lot longer and a lot better.
Yeah, it's very much a long lineup right now, especially with Giancarlo Stanton kind of starting to heat up after that grand slam this weekend. Gleyber Torres at the top, and then, as you said, with Juan Soto. So having that deeper lineup with Alex Verdugo batting in front of Anthony Volpe really gives the youngster a lot to look at for a young man that is well aware of the position and the city and the ballpark that he plays in. Growing up in New Jersey, not too far from Yankee Stadium, and where Derek Jeter, played and made his bones. So for Volpe to have the season that he did last year, a little bit overlooked because it wasn't a Derek Jeter type season, but for a rookie of 21 years old, that was really impressive. He's picked up where he's left off. No sophomore slump for him, and I think this guy is going to be a real crucial player in any kind of window of contention that the Yankees are going to have, and potential World Series run that they might make in these next couple of years, with or without Juan Soto.
Absolutely. And I think one of the best things I heard this offseason from Volpe was, a lot of people are patting him on the back for the 2020 season, winning a Gold Glove. Like, that was a good rookie season. Everyone's saying you did a good job there, but he says he expects more of himself offensively. He didn't feel like he had a good offensive year last year, and we're seeing what he's capable of early on here. So good to see him get off to this start. We'll see if he can carry that over. A couple of the guys to talk about: Logan O'Hoppe, finally healthy for the Angels. He's hitting 385 right now. So we might not be talking about the Angels much throughout the season, but O'Hoppe is one of those players, as they either try to continue to rework around Mike Trout or eventually transition to a new era, that looks to be a building block, hopefully, if he can finally stay on the field for a full season here.
Yeah, you lose Ohtani, but you gain a healthy O'Hoppe. That's critical. He was my American League Rookie of the Year award pick. Got to see him in the Arizona Fall League in 2021 when he was still a Phillies prospect. So I think O'Hoppe, is one of those guys in a Angels organization right now that is obviously scrapping just a little bit. And I think that's kind of lowered expectations. The eyes are off them a little bit. And the only eyes that really seem to be on them are the ones that just want to be critical of Anthony Rendon right now. So I think that's a group right there that is going to get their teeth kicked in, I think, maybe for a year or two. But by the time they all get to the point where they're reaching free agency, their second or third year of arbitration, whatever it may be, I think they're gonna eventually click. Because so many of them, right, from Zach Neto to Nolan Shanuel, they had no opportunity to figure things out in the minor leagues, get working through a slump. That's one of the reasons why guys are left down in the minors who might be raking. Organizations love to have their guys struggle so they can know what it's like to have that, because you're going to have that in the majors. Even the best players will struggle. But how do you work through that? How do you get past that? And Neto and Shanuel didn't get an opportunity to do that because they weren't in the minors very long. Similar to O'Hoppe's story. So I think, given in a few years, that this group of players, these young guys that have been advanced quickly, they're really going to click and they're going to gel.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be really big for them to develop at the big league level. It's crazy to say that, but that's really what they've done. I mean, they gutted their farm system and said, everyone that's still good, come on up. So we'll see how the Angels progress throughout the year. Let's talk about a guy that already had his breakout, but then had a regression, and that's Jeremy Pena. Had a fantastic playoff run, ALCS MVP, World Series MVP. He was unbelievable. I was completely sold on the Jeremy Pena hype train going into last season. I believe I was stupid enough on an early edition of this show to say that I would take Jeremy Pena. I might have said over Bo Bichette. Okay, I was that crazy because I was talking about the shortstop position, and I love Pena's defense, but it looks like a horrible take a year later. I can't get around it. I will say, though, couple home runs, hitting over 300, Jeremy Pena. Maybe this is the year he puts it all together again.
We love comparing one guy to his teammate when they tick off all those boxes. You go, oh, Jeremy Pena, he's going to be the next Carlos Correa, going to be the next Jose Altuve. I think we all saw that, and then the sophomore slump bites. It always ends up striking again. So it's nice for him to be able to do that at the bottom of the lineup, resetting just a little bit, like you said, regressing. A lot of ways it's a reset to say, okay, last year happened, it's over. Just go out and be yourself. Don't try to be the next Carlos Correa. try to be the you version of Jeremy Pena. And so I think, the leadership turnover might help just a little bit, getting a fresh start. That's not to say Dusty Baker didn't handle Jeremy Pena right. It just, it furthers that narrative of, okay, reset, new season, new manager, same group of guys. This is our last opportunity to do that. They are the superstars. They are the ones getting the big contracts. Let them do that dirty work, and let me kind of do my job as a bit of a role player. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can still contribute and be a great player as a role player. I mean, look at the career that Scott Brocious was able to have, with the Yankees winning a World Series MVP. So, those guys have a definite value. And, Jeremy Pena, well, could he be an MVP again in the postseason? I think so. I think so after this start here. It definitely is a possibility. He's going to get the opportunity. He's with Houston. So don't beat yourself up too bad about that take, Ryan.
It was a bad one. It was a bad one. Yeah, I should have bought stock in a player like Wyatt Langford, because then maybe, I'd be in a little bit more solid ground, because Langford, although he hasn't gotten it off to an outstanding start, we've seen the potential. I mean, he tried to score from first base on a ground ball to the shortstop. He just seems like a gamer, and there are a lot of people excited about Wyatt Langford. So I couldn't talk about breakout stars in the American League without mentioning the guy that a lot of people are picking to win the Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, more of a breakdown star here in their early going. OPS under 700, but again, not every rookie is going to immediately come up and have that Corbin Carroll like start. I think a lot of people saw that, and could an option down to the minor leagues be necessary for a guy like Langford? Absolutely. I think that could be something that benefits him, and it might not even be just like a 1 week stint, right? Like it doesn't necessarily mean he needs to overhaul everything, but it could be a bit too much for him. And so maybe going down to AAA and playing a little bit at Round Rock almost becomes a bit of a vacation for him. He remembers the player that he is, and then he's back on the roster like nothing. Rangers still eligible to get that bonus draft pick should he become the American League Rookie of the Year award. So, tough start just a little bit for Langford in general. But again, not every guy can come out the gates like a Julio Rodriguez or Mike Trout, who, to be fair, wasn't even Mike Trout. His first taste of the majors at the end of one season when the rosters expanded.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. At this stage of the season, could amount to one bad series, drops those numbers. Langford goes out, has a big week. Next week, we'll be talking about how great he looks. So we'll see how he ultimately pans out. But he's definitely a guy that everyone is circled right now to watch because he is really exciting. He's on a really good team. Let's touch on the team that's overperformed the first couple weeks here. The Red Sox. And Jarren Duran had a little bit of a breakout last year. I wanted to spotlight him because we actually pinned him on our preseason series. We did breakout players in each division. And Jarren Duran was one of the guys we spotlighted for the Red Sox. He's got off to a good start. We're all waiting for Tristan Casas to build off of his rookie season. But Duran so far has been the better of those two.
Yeah, he's kind of benefited from what Mookie Betts was as we talked about last week, right? Hitting in front of a generational talent. And for Jarren Duran, of course, that's Rafael Devers. So, hitting leadoff, kind of giving some stability, getting on base. Duran is similar to Jeremy Pena in the sense that, he wasn't really able to take that step to the next level. Didn't have the rookie season that Pena did. Didn't have that postseason experience, but almost looked like he was one of those failed projects for the Red Sox. But this year he's really stepped up. I mean, I'd argue he's even had one of the top 10 weeks in all of MLB. If you really look at the numbers and crunch that, and it probably helps with Devers behind him, Tyler O'Neill behind him. Unfortunately, not Trevor Story, but nevertheless, Duran and Casas, part of that young core that Boston hopes can kind of, reset the table just a little bit, get them into the postseason, despite the fact that the front office really didn't help the roster out this offseason.
They didn't do much with that rotation other than getting Lucas Giolito, and yet they have a great rotation right now this minute. Cutter Crawford has had some good numbers, Nick Pivetta, and the guy whose numbers just jumped out to me, who could be a breakout star, because we've been thinking, all right, this guy has a lot of potential for some years now. That's Tanner Houck, 16 strikeouts in 11 and a third innings pitched, 1 walk, has not allowed a run through his first couple starts. So Tanner Houck, we all were talking about Brian Bayo, but maybe Houck is the new ace of the Red Sox.
Yeah, that's such a nice spot to have. And anytime you're a number 5 starter, the expectations aren't quite as high. You're not going against another team's ace. You're going against another team's number 5 starter. So that's a real good spot for Houck to be. And another one of those players where will they or won't they develop into the player the organization is hoping for Houck to be able to do that. Garrett Whitlock, that's one that I'm sure Yankees baseball, what is he? The POBO, president of baseball operations. Is that Brian Cashman's role? Either way, he's kicking himself because he's going, how did we not protect Garrett Whitlock? That was an absolute poach by the Red Sox, Rule 5 pick. Now he's in their rotation, and it's like, Lucas Giolito, who, Chris Sale, who, they're doing great right now up in Boston.
It would be so surprising and also not surprising in the sense that the Red Sox are this franchise that sometimes it doesn't look pretty necessarily on paper when it starts, but the vibes, if they're okay and you're playing good baseball in Fenway and you're going to have a home crowd that'll always be behind you, you can shock some people. So who knows? We were all sort of just setting the Red Sox to the side at the start of this season. It's 9 games, but a 6-3 start will make you take notice and say, okay, maybe the Red Sox aren't going to be the worst team in the AL East, but they won't be the best. And we have to talk about the guy that started to break out last year in the second half. We were expecting it all season. The numbers didn't look great in 2023 for Grayson Rodriguez, but again, he had to go down to the minor leagues. He struggled. He went down. He developed. He learned some things, came back up and pitched great, and he has continued that this year. 2.19 ERA through 2 starts, 16 strikeouts and 12 1/3. He's 2-0. He's won both of his starts. So Grayson Rodriguez, he might not be the ace of this team because they got Corbin Burns for a year, but he's going to be a guy that is well on his way to breaking out to being one of the best young pitchers in baseball and a guy who might even get an all-star nod this year.
Yeah, I think he's critical to Baltimore's success, maybe more in the postseason than in the regular season, because you need one of those shutdown starters, right? And he pairs up really well with Corbin Burns. But Baltimore's got the starting pitching depth, to withstand any kind of injury or failure to be successful in a Grayson Rodriguez. But I think he's just so pivotal for them in the number 3 spot too, in the rotation, going back to what we were talking about before. Yeah, he's an exciting guy, and for Baltimore to regain the lead in the American League. Look, you can't win a division in April. You can lose one, but you can't win one. So all things aside, I don't think anyone in Baltimore is too worried about the start and losing a series to the Pirates and, the solid start by the Yankees and the Red Sox. But Grayson Rodriguez, I think, is going to be critical for Baltimore's rotation.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really a place where they have improved so much from the years where they weren't quite up to this level. They always were having all these prospects come up, and it was all below the surface, and it's still a ton below the surface when it comes to position players. But G-Rod up atop that rotation, he is huge for them, and a team that we're going to be following very closely all year. We've already talked about these next 3, but they're just worth mentioning again. Garrett Crochet, clearly an early breakout star with what he's done. Cole Reagans, Tariq Skubal, guys that broke out in the second half last year, and this is their first full season being considered aces. So we've touched on it in past shows and a little bit today, but the AL Central suddenly has a lot of arms that we're kind of interested in watching here every given series.
It's a tongue twister, but I like trying to say it. Love those AL Central lefties.
There you go. There you go. You nailed it. You slowed it down. You were able to handle that tongue
I
twister.
did cheat, didn't I?
Yeah, you didn't do it quick. But let's go through now to the other league, the NL breakout stars so far. Jared Kelenic. We all knew this was going to happen. Even though
you okay over there? Saying that
name? Look, as soon as they traded for Kelenic, I hopped on a live stream for Locked On Mets to break down the new Mets killer because I knew, even though he looked bad in spring, here he is in the regular season. He's batting .579, 11 for 19. And the thing that I noted, I went to the splits. I said, my guess is the Braves are not letting him face many lefties. And sure enough, 1 at bat versus a left-handed pitcher so far. So you got him just focused on facing righties, playing good defense. And Kelenic could be in for a nice breakout season where he really established himself. We've been waiting for so long on this guy who is, a top prospect in all of baseball. Now maybe he finally has his chance to put it all together.
A key piece in a trade for a Hall of Famer asterisk. We'll get to that debate when he's finally on a ballot in Robinson Cano. But yeah, you know when certain players go to teams in situations that say, oh, that is really just the perfect spot for a young guy like that. And he's had nothing but success surrounded by a really deep Atlanta lineup. And, you know, Brian Snitker just pushing all the right buttons, especially in that Arizona series. Like, I mean, come on, Atlanta, they continue to do it and find guys. If they don't need to go get Sean Murphy and Matt Olson, that's fine. They can go shop at the bargain bin and get a Kelenic and Reynaldo Lopez. So it's good for Kelenic and all the hype that you know was hoisted upon him, and some of the issues that he had in Seattle with, you know, getting you know, sent down to the minors when maybe he was ready, and certain comments that were made by front office personnel. Now he's getting that opportunity to shine, and he's absolutely doing that.
Yeah, he's not going to hit over 500 all year, but could he hit in the high 200s and hit some home runs, play good defense, and just really establish himself as a solid, you know, strong side of the platoon outfielder for now, and then eventually maybe get a shot against lefties in a future season? I think he absolutely can. And the way that I structured our notes for the show today is I went Kelenic, and then I went to some Mets that are playing well to make myself feel better. So Brett Baty and Francisco Alvarez in year two. Alvarez, I was expecting him to break out. I was. We saw it last year, and I also saw a player that showed up to spring training, much improved. The particular area was throwing out runners, and that's something where you see it was just work throughout the offseason, realized. And now we're also seeing him offensively step into the box and really just, you know, be on attack mode constantly, look really comfortable and confident in a way that he didn't last year. He had stretches where he hit his home runs. He had 25 home runs as a rookie, but now we're seeing him, you know, pick up singles in RBI situations and not just be swinging for the long ball. Alvarez looks really good. Now, all of a sudden, he's not batting sixth, seventh. He's batting third, fourth in this Mets lineup.
He is an absolute dog. And of course, meaning that in the best way. He is, I think he's already elevated himself easily to a top 10 catcher in the game right now. But I think next year we're going to be talking about this guy as, is he the best catcher in the National League? Like that's how immediate his impact was. Last year, the rookie class for the National League was absolutely loaded. I don't even think he got a third place vote. And you look at his numbers, and one of the best rookie seasons since Buster Posey that we've had from a catcher. So just a deep class. But yeah, Alvarez kind of almost doing it quietly in New York, because the Mets have become a little bit less relevant on the national scene. They don't have those same stars. People aren't familiar with Francisco Alvarez, but you absolutely should get yourself familiarized with him, because I believe this guy is going to be an absolute dude. He already is right now, but I think it's going to be something that continues. It lasts, and he's going to be one of the best catchers in the game over the next 5+ years.
It's crazy because I'm kicking myself. I have said on my show that by the end of this season, Francisco Alvarez would be the best catcher not named Adley Rutschman. And it sounds so much better to just say the best catcher in the National League. It was right in front of me. I didn't see it. So hats off to you. I'll probably be stealing that for Locked On Mets. So I just want to let you know in advance. Brett Baty, the other side of this coin, though, when it comes to these young Mets players, there was a ton of questions because you look at the numbers last year. I mean, the Mets at third base were the worst team in baseball last season, and that was largely due to Brett Baty. He carried his struggles at the plate into the field with him. And now we're seeing sort of a flip of that. He's playing so good defensively that it seems to be carrying over to the box. He's hitting 290, had a great series in Cincinnati. He's actually been right behind Francisco Alvarez. And it's really crucial to the Mets that Baty can be this type of a middle of the order bat, because they're going to have Pete Alonso, JD Martinez eventually here, and Francisco Alvarez. So to have a lefty that can break up all those righties is going to be big. I'm telling you, if this defense holds up, it's huge for the Mets this season. I don't even care if the Mets are good. I want Brett Baty to be good, because that solidifies a position that they desperately need for years to come.
This is like Anthony Volpe is to Derek Jeter, is what Brett Baty is to David Wright, right? Captain America, Mr. Met. Yeah, it seemed like, you know, Baty was immediately the next guy up 2+ years ago, and he just really never got that opportunity. 2022 is kind of his first opportunity, but the Mets were really in contender mode. They were gunning for that postseason. Same thing for the last year. It really wasn't until the Eduardo Escobar trade that he started getting that regular playing time. And that's so hard for some of those young guys who are in a situation like that where they almost can't develop in a natural way. They just have to do what the team is doing and go with that flow and try to fit in a certain kind of mold. And that, I think, maybe put some undue pressure on a young guy like that. So again, in this season, that's kind of a transition season, if you will, because I don't think it's going to be a period that lasts too long. But nevertheless, Beatty is having that opportunity to go out there, play every single day consistently, and it's really starting to show with that young core of guys around, like players like Francisco Alvarez.
Absolutely. And you mentioned kind of the team around you and fitting in. It was a tough team to be a part of last year. I think that dragged Beatty down too. The Mets were just an absolute train wreck. And I think he put a lot of pressure on himself to try to help pull them out of it. Just didn't work. So I'm hoping that these two can at least give the Mets fans out there something to watch all season long. Speaking of a similar type of story here in Washington, if there is a star player to watch on this team, we'll see when Dylan Cruz comes up, James Wood. But right now, CJ Abrams is the guy. He's got a 994 OPS to start the season. He's already hit a couple home runs, got some stolen bases. He's a guy who could legitimately go 40-40 if he puts it all together. That's the guy right now that people are looking at in Washington. So we'll see if he can really build off of what was a good season last year, but he has a chance to now have a great season.
Washington just doing the best that they can in the wake of that 2019 World Series. I mean, I think when we look back, that will be one of the biggest shames maybe as far as the sporting world is concerned when it comes to the pandemic, because they didn't really get a chance to celebrate, I think, that World Series title, right? It really wasn't until 2021 when fans were let back in that there was any relevance. But by that point, so many players had left. And so Nationals doing the best they can with offloading the Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, all their key guys. And then, of course, Josh Bell and Juan Soto, which is how CJ Abrams ends up on the Nationals. So they've got all of these young guys, these top prospects that both the Padres and Dodgers said, hey, no, these guys are amazing. These are the players you want to build around. Well, top 100 guys don't end up always as a Juan Soto or a Max Scherzer. Like, there is an in-between land of really solid players who may only get, one all-star game selection. And, Abrams, maybe this is his year to do that. Maybe this is one of those seasons where the Nationals can maybe get two players selected to the all-star game in Texas. But Abrams, has to be one of those guys. If there's going to be a young core for the Nationals to build around, Abrams, Josiah Gray, Keibert Ruiz, all those guys have to step up and be those players.
Yeah, that's how they turn the page. And obviously getting the top prospects up midseason hopefully will help further along that core. But Abrams is the guy that you think you can point to right now who I think we're most sure of, but we still have to see it all come together. Let's look at the NL Central. A lot of different guys I want to touch on real quick. Spencer Steer. I know he already broke out a little bit last year, but I'll tell you, he looks like the best bat in that lineup right now. An OPS of 13-13, 3 home runs. He is really swinging a hot bat. And also you have in Pittsburgh, O'Neal Cruz finally back healthy. So let's go through those two guys first here on guys who can really become star players in that division.
Spencer Steer at one point when I got notification that I was going to be voting on the National League Rookie of the Year award in the middle of September, he was a kind of a dark horse for my third place pick because, again, he was just doing it at the plate. And while the defensive metrics really didn't like what he was doing, and I don't trust the defensive metrics all that much to give him a ton of credence, especially when they take away, so much from some guys, wins above replacement, their numbers, both for Fangraphs and Baseball Reference. I didn't hold that against him. What I wanted to give him credit for was the fact that he was able to play a bunch of different positions, and that gave the Reds that much more value when Jonathan India came back, and they had Noelvi Marte and Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McClain. Well, where are they going to play all those guys? Well, where they aren't going to play them is wherever Spencer Steer is needed. So he was able to go and find those different spots. And now this year, he's been a little bit more stable, not moving around quite as much. But man, he's been one of those players that just goes out there, does it, a little bit old school in many ways. And you like to see players like that kind of get some notoriety when they aren't as flashy as some of their teammates.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone talks about Ellie and everyone says, oh, he's the breakout star this year. And he very well could be, but Spencer Steer is a guy that is really consistent with the bat. Again, it almost feels like you're building off of a breakout, but not enough people talked about Spencer Steer last year. So we're going to talk about him this year. Looking at the Brewers, you got Jackson Churio, who I talked about on last show, athleticism that jumps off the screen. And yet his teammate, Bryce Turang, 7 stolen bases, hitting 360 this year. So they're going to play a really athletic brand of baseball in Milwaukee this year with those two guys.
I mean, you might as well, right? We know that speed is kind of that new way of winning ball games that's been undervalued over the last few years. And now with it being that much easier to steal a bag, the Brewers are definitely taking advantage of that market inefficiency and utilizing their guys and their speed. So I think that's something that Pat Murphy and the entire staff over there in Milwaukee, should be credited with. And I think that's really helping ease Jackson Churio, into this, because as a young man, that power is going to maybe take a little while to develop. We'll wait to see if he can, be a 25, 30 homer guy. But for the time being, he doesn't need to do that. Use your legs. That's a strength. Use that ability to recover and play, day after day after day. And so, so far that's been working for the Brewers in a big way.
It absolutely has. And we're talking about young, under 21-year-old outfielders who might as well throw Jackson Merrill into the conversation here. Hitting 303 through 12 games. The Padres said, you know what? We can't go out and replace Juan Soto through free agency, so let's just call up a top prospect and see what he can do. And so far, so good in San Diego for Merrill.
Yeah, he's been nice to see a little bit of a breath of fresh air when, San Diego has been turning the keys over to so many veterans and kind of quadruple A players that haven't gotten an opportunity, but to have just a true prospect like that come up and do it out of position too. Like so many guys, they'll play a position for a year or 2 or 3, and I'm just still learning the position, and it's true they are. Jackson Merrill is quite literally learning that position here on the fly. So I think that's fun, and that's probably helpful, I think, for San Diego's clubhouse to have maybe a little brother when they were operating with everyone acting as a big brother, even the younger guys like a Fernando Tatis Jr. He's young, so he should be the younger brother, but you understand if he's got a bit of that older brother swag. So Jackson Merrill, I think, is probably what the roster needed.
Yeah, sometimes you need that mix. And the Padres, even when they had 2 really young guys in Juan Soto and Fernando Tatis Jr. last year, it's young guys who are 2 of the biggest stars in the game. I mean, really, maybe the 2 biggest young stars in the game. So now you bring down the notoriety a little bit, but you add a young player to kind of be a spark plug. And we'll see how it ultimately works out for them over the long haul. We're not expecting Jackson Merrill to replace Juan Soto's production, but to be a solid starting center fielder for them. That's something that I think he can do, and he's proven it early on. Let's move to one more team here. Actually, 2 more teams in the West. I'll ask about your Rockies next. Patrick Bailey trying to fill the shoes of Buster Posey. Very tough, but he's hitting over 300 so far, and there are a lot of high expectations on his ability to, for one, be able to command that pitching staff, but also maybe to be better offensively this time around.
Yeah, I think, we should have really seen this coming in a lot of ways, where as soon as they drafted Joey Bart, they immediately turned around and said, yeah, but Patrick Bailey, we can't really pass up on this guy. So, he did a really good job as a rookie last year, more on the defensive side than on the offensive side. Joey Bart, of course, now getting traded to Pittsburgh. Tom Murphy's there, a nice veteran catcher who's got some pop himself. So I think Bailey's going to benefit from a presence like Tom Murphy, who is a former Rocky. So, Patrick Bailey, I think, is in a good spot right there, dealing with mostly veteran pitchers, with San Francisco. They're going to have even more with Alex Cobb and Robbie Ray when they come back. So I think that's going to benefit Bailey, and that in turn is going to benefit the entire pitching staff.
Yeah, it's definitely a team that needs a lot of things to go right. And Bailey is one of those things where they put a lot of expectation on his ability to really start and be the guy. And so far, so good. We'll close when it comes to the position players on the Rockies. I said Ezekiel Tovar, but is there anyone else that you would spotlight as a breakout star in Colorado this year?
Well, Colorado fans and the Colorado's front office is hoping Ryan McMahon can finally take that final step that he's really been looking to take for the last 3 years. Had a really big 2019 season, and it seemed like he was destined to hit 30 homers and 100 RBI, and he really hasn't been able to get there yet. It's a month-long spell of struggle, and he's had that the last couple of years, even after he signed a 6-year extension ahead of the 2022 campaign. And he's finally really starting to put it together. Hit the walk-off grand slam on Friday night, and then in his first at-bat on Saturday, hit a home run, something that only the likes of Dante Bichette, Larry Walker, and I'm drawing a blank on who those other guys were. Legendary guys. Jason Giambi, legendary Rockies player, at least in the Rockies world. He's legendary. So I think Ryan McMahon is that player that we know the defense is incredibly strong. He's a finalist for the last 3 years running. Has a decent shot at winning it this year. I think if he plays his best baseball, and now if his bat can just be consistent, got moved up to third in the order these last 2 games against Tampa Bay, I think he could really polish off and be a true breakout star. Maybe make his first All-Star appearance as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a pretty wide open competition there in Colorado. So Ryan McMahon could actually absolutely grab that one. Looking at our last 2 honorable mentions, we can call them here when it comes to breakout stars, guys that sort of broke out in a various degree last year. Bobby Miller, we saw him look really good as a rookie. 2 very different starts for him this year. First start, 6 innings pitched, 11 strikeouts, 0 earned runs. I'm sure he was featured prominently in your article about the Dodgers' potential aces, and then an inning and 2/3, 5 earned runs. So that's on you, right? The second start being so bad.
It was the Patrick Lyons jinx, 100%.
All right, and then moving on to the other starter that we got here from this division, Michael King. 3.14 ERA in 14 1/3 innings pitched so far this year. Best start, his most recent one, 7 scoreless against the Giants on Saturday. So Michael King getting his first full season in rotation. The Padres expecting a lot of him. I think the pressure, came off a little bit when they got Dylan Cease, right? That's all right. You don't have to be one of the top 3 guys. You can be a back end starter for us, but he will be a starting pitcher all year. So those are 2 starting pitchers to watch all season.
Yeah, and kind of being sandwiched right now in the rotation between Dylan Cease and a knuckleballer, Matt Waldron, is kind of a unique position to be in. And if you want to go to the exact opposite place in the baseball world, then a very constricting and a very intense environment there in Bronx with the Yankees. How about a laid back spot in San Diego where their City Connect uniform makes them look like Barbie and Ken rollerblading down Venice Beach? That's about as relaxed as you can get. And I think that's going to benefit, someone like Michael King, who's new to that environment. And there's still some pressure there. I think there's still some of the chemistry questions that need to be worked out in that clubhouse. But King is kind of bringing a new, fresh perspective to that. And I think he's enjoying the new environment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely going to be a completely different situation than going from swingman, New York media to full-time starter, West Coast, NL West division. It's going to be really cool to see how he can put it all together through hopefully 30 starts. So excited to see what he does his 4th time through here. Let's now go into the weekend. We'll close off the show this way every Sunday in particular. What are we most excited for this week? Which series do you have your eye on as we get into the 3rd week technically of the season? 2nd week? How's this work? 2nd full week, 3rd week. Who do you like?
Well, for the Rockies, Arizona comes to town. You got a rematch of the opening day matchup with Zach Gallen against Kyle Freeland. A lot of hope that, Freeland will be a lot better than, being a part of that 14-run inning there on opening night in Arizona. So that will be an interesting series, getting to see the NL champs in Denver. But the Rockies' next series is one, not to look too far ahead, that I'm kind of interested in, just as a statistical nerd that likes finding all of these strange, different anomalies. The Rockies have never won a game in Toronto. They're actually 0-9. They've been there 3 times. They've won in Montreal. They beat the Expos plenty of times, but they've never actually won a game in Toronto. So that will be something fun to watch. In fact, our very own Kevin Henry from Just Baseball, he'll be out there covering that series from the Blue Jays Rockies side, doing the great stuff that he does out there. So I've got my eyes on that. That'll be kind of interesting.
Fun week ahead for the Rockies for sure. The series I'm looking at, and Mets Braves is obviously one, of course, that I'm partial to, but Tigers Pirates pops out to me because it's two teams we've talked about a lot on this show that we're still trying to learn about. Are they for real? Now we see them square off against one another and see which one's better in this upcoming series. So I really like that one a lot. And kind of similar as well, Brewers Reds, an NL Central matchup. Always good to see division rivals, particularly division rivals that are intending to compete this year. So I like those two series in particular to see what we have in some of these teams that have gotten off to pretty good starts.
I'm also interested in the Royals series. Now they're playing a team that's 2-7, but it's the Houston Astros. So I think this is a nice test for them with Houston playing, a little bit better. When you start off 0-4, all right, well, they've won like what, 2 of their next 5, if my math is correct. So again, not great, but it still is the Houston Astros. You still know a lot of those names on the backs of those jerseys, even if they are a little bit smaller than normal. I'm also interested in seeing what the Eclipse game is going to be like tomorrow in Cleveland. I think the Guardians are going to go out, take batting practice early. I think fans will be allowed in the ballpark at that point. And then there's going to be an eclipse, and then they'll play a baseball game, and maybe Moonlight Graham comes back from the dead. I don't really know how what they've got planned there in Cleveland, but that should be interesting. And there'll be more people probably paying attention to not only baseball, but the Cleveland Guardians than typical because of this scientific anomaly that we get every so often.
That's really cool. I had no idea there was an eclipse game. So now I got to make sure I mark that on my calendar and check that one out. It'll be probably more exciting than whatever's going on in the Bronx with the Marlins coming into town, but they did get a win. We've got to make that known. The Marlins have finally won a game. They had to survive a rain delay to get there, but they are on the board with a victory, and now they're going to go get spanked by the Yankees probably and pick up some more losses, I would imagine.
They're on pace for 16 wins now? That's another reason why these early records, you go, all right, hold on, let's project this out over the course of a full season. Like, as bad as the Rockies have been, and as much as I feel they're still very much a 100 loss team, they're not a 25 win team. Like, we don't see teams like that anymore in this era of baseball. So their luck has to turn at some point. Is it going to be against the Yankees? Again, odds are against that happening, but that's baseball, and that's why we play those games.
That's why we do it. It's always funny when we'll be talking on Wednesday here. We'll say, wow, the Marlins actually swept the Yankees, huh? How did that happen? We could play back the audio from this right here. Like, we didn't think this could ever happen, yet here we go. So we will be back on Wednesday for our next live stream. Probably, I think last Wednesday we did 5 o'clock, so we might shoot for something around there. And we're going to continue to do our live streams Wednesdays and Sundays throughout the season. So make sure that you check out our YouTube channel. We'll always be streaming there, as well as the Just Baseball Twitter account. So find our YouTube channel. What's our Twitter account here as well?
Who's Better BB?
Who's Better BB? If you're watching, you can find our Twitter handles on the screen as well. We'll be back talking to you about who's better in baseball again this upcoming Wednesday.